Begin recording now. Okay, continuing with some introductions, I would like to introduce the following members of the Princeton Human Services Commission Needs Assessment Committee, as well as other members who were involved in this project. So we have our Commission Subcommittee Chair, Erica Degliao, committee members, Christina Gonzalez, Ming Kwong, and Veronica Olivares Weber, who also serves as the Princeton Human Services Commission Chair, former Commission Chair Ross Wishnick, and committee members Monique Jones. And a special thank you to the Princeton Survey Research Center, who worked with the committee to design and launch the survey. Well, folks, don't forget to mute yourselves if you don't mind. A thank you to Dr. Oscar.
I think you're muted now.
Oh, you turned on your mute. Oops, I think you muted everyone.
Forgive me, can you hear now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'll pick up where I left off. I was thanking the Princeton Survey Research Center, who worked with the committee to design and launch the survey. And a thank you to Dr. Oscar Torres Reyna, head of the Economic Statistics Services with Princeton University, who provided the data analysis that we're going to hear about today. Another special thank you to former Human Services Director, Melissa Mercuro, who is now with Princeton University. So this presentation is a summary of the data collected from the community needs assessment that was conducted between 2020 and 2021. The information that will be presented summarizes the results of the survey that was sent to you all of you community partners, to gather input on Princeton's response to the broad range of needs that arose during the pandemic. The purpose of this presentation is to share with you all our findings, but to also hear from you all if you believe we captured the information correctly and what your organization may be experiencing today. In the interest of time, we'll ask that you all hold your comments and questions until the end. And please feel free to use the chat feature or the raise your hand feature. We'll also ask folks if they don't mind to keep their comments or questions just to 1 minute, since we have a good number of people that were able to join us. And please remember to mute yourselves. So I will ask Erica now to provide additional information on the needs assessment timeline that has brought us to this point. Erica?
Great, thanks, Ro, very much. And thank you all for joining us today. And for those of you who participated in this needs assessment, big thank you to all of you. We could not have gotten to this point without your input and your patience. So we actually started this needs assessment before the pandemic with a brief meeting with some community partners. I don't even remember the date of that, that were interrupted by the starting of the pandemic and really, priority needs that just hit the community, the state, and the rest of the country in a pretty drastic way. But by, I guess, the early summer, we began to realize that this was, we kind of needed to know what was going on and what was happening and how various members of the community and our partners were responding to needs and whether they had changed. So we instituted some listening sessions that I believe a number of you were part of all through that fall on basic categories covering basic needs, children's needs, health and well-being, childcare, employment, etc. And several folks came through and met with us on Zoom. We're all getting used to Zoom during that time, and shared your insights during those essentially focus groups. And as they were partway through, we started to put together the needs assessment that you're going to hear, the survey results today, to get more input from folks who weren't part of those sessions and to get into some more detail about who are being served, what access to various needs was like during the pandemic. That kind of brings us to where we are now. That survey was done in February, March of 2021. Really represents a point in time, as did the listening session. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind as you're hearing from Oscar and the work that he's done on analyzing a very broad range of data from a broad range of service providers. This represents really a point in time. And that also tells us why it's so very important to hear from you all, both to get a sense of your reaction to what we've analyzed, but also to hear where things are now for everyone. So without going further, please thank Oscar, and I'll turn it over to Oscar Torres Reyna for the results of our survey.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Ro. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to work on this project. And as we go along in the survey, just keep in mind that this survey represents the average or the aggregation of all your responses. So as I go along, I will be making that point constantly. And this basically represents the broad range of responses from you in the survey. So as Ro mentioned, this survey was conducted in the first quarter of 2021 by the Princeton Human Service Commission, along with the Princeton University Survey Research Center. And basically the name of the survey is the Survey of Princeton Human Service Providers. So basically this survey captures the experience that you had during the pandemic times. And that's basically what the purpose was. So basically that is get information from you guys, from the providers of the services, in terms of the those who target low-income community, how the changes, what changes happens in terms of demand for services and coordinations as a result of the pandemic. As many of you know, the survey has two parts. One part was an answer for the person who has a general idea of the service providing. And the second part was actually answered by those who had direct contact with those the community. In general, 127 individuals were invited, 53 responded, as 42%, well, 42% response rate, which is pretty good. They represent 48 organizations. The survey was quite complex, and we have on average some respondents between 4 and 46 respondents per question. So the sample kind of changes depending on the questions in the survey. This is the list of the organizations that participated in the survey. And one of the first things that we wanted to know is basically who the organizations actually serve, right? So in general, we saw here that 46% of the organizations serve families with minor children. And that went down a little bit low in 2020 because of the pandemic to 42%. So in general, the bulk of your clientele represents either one adult, two adults, and children in the house. And again, this is an average. So some of you might have a higher percentages, some of you might have lower percentages. So this is the average of all 48 organizations that actually responded the survey. The second group that is that receives attention from the providers is adolescents and young adults. Basically 1 in every 5, and this didn't change between 2019 and 2020. There is a third group that also has some attention, which is single adults and older adults. Single adults, 16%, that didn't change in 2020. There was a slight change in older adults served by your organizations from 13% in 2019 to 16% in 2020. This is not a statistical significant change, but it's a change nevertheless. The last group that receives attention is disabled adults and homeless individuals, 3% for disabled adults in 2019. That went up 2 percentage points in 2020. And also homeless individuals, 1% of your clientele are homeless individuals in 2019. That went up also 2 percentage points in 2020. So here you can see, and this again, these are all averages. Some of you might have higher levels in some of the groups, but overall, these results show that there is a group of the population, disabled adults and homeless individuals, who have not a broad range of services available to them. Is that an issue or not? That is for you guys to think about it. And also the distribution of the other groups. For the most part, 3 out of 4 in your the people that you serve reside in Princeton. Based on your responses, 50% of the clientele are female, 43% are male, and there is a 7% for others. This is the racial distribution, racial and ethnic distribution. 31% white, 28% Latinx, Black, 18%, Asian, 6%, and other, which is a mixed race, I guess, is 17%. 2/3 of the clientele for you that you serve is 68% actually is low income, and 25% are undocumented individuals. So this is just a broad idea of the profile of the population that you serve. How the provision of services changed in 2020. So in general, it was a big drop in by April. So we have on average before during the first quarter in 2020, on average, you were serving around 1,700 residents, and that went down to around 500 by April, and remains between 500 and 600 for the rest of the year, hitting a low point in July. So this is the average trend in terms of the number of residents that you help. We divided that also by different topics. We aggregated each provider into different groups. And we found that there was a spike in one particular group, which are those providers that focus on food insecurity. If you notice, between March and June of 2020, there was a huge spike on the need for residents who have fallen into the food insecurity category. So all organizations that focus on this particular topic, they saw a spike on that, and then that went down after the summer, or during the half of the summer after that. With that information, these graphics might be a little bit hard to read for some of you, depends on the screens that you have, but we also try to explore deep into these different categories for the providers and the groups that you help. So we see, for example, in families with minor children, the category that was a little bit, that saw a spike from 2019 to 2020 was food insecurity. Immigration services kind of affected the rest of the groups: disabled adults, older. So there is a typo in disabled, I forgot a D there. Older adults, homeless individuals, single adults. They saw a spike on immigration services. And in older adults, you can see a 25% touch points increase among housing, in the housing category. So again, hopefully these results give you some idea on possible gaps are in terms of service. Can you hear me? Yeah, yeah. All right, so how does the survey examine service provision? So basically, this is the second part of the survey. 56 services were asked, so whether you provide a service or not. And those 56 services were grouped in 12 categories. And there were two questions on that. One is, do you provide this service or do you refer elsewhere for the service? And then there is this was just basically a yes or no question. So since we have two questions with two options, what we did is we decided to combine those into one particular variable that combines the do not provide some refer and the provide some refer. This is to give us, or to narrow it down, all the variation that we see among all the service providers, which is 48 of you guys, into a smaller category, so we can actually differentiate those who provide versus those who don't provide. This graph presents the results of that aggregation. This is at the category level. So this is like 12 different categories that the survey has. And you can see that a third, 33.3% of the service providers goes to focus on educational services. Also 32% basic necessities, 31.6% in social and recreational cultural activities. 2/3 do not provide, or there is some marginal reference to that. And on the lower end, we see healthcare. Only 4% of providers do directly provide or refer. 5% legal services. So this is basically by the aggregation, aggregated categories. And this is for all 56 services that were asked in the survey. At the top, we see that about a little bit over 50%, 50 food and food service, helping get with enough food. That's the category has the most over the majority of the service providers. The next one is enrichment, then children's educational expenses, socialization, arts, and recreation. So those are the top. Notice the sea of blue that we have in here. So you can see whether we probably, most of the providers do not provide or have some marginal preference. Does this mean that we need more coordination or not? Not sure about that, but it does strike me that we have a lot of services, and that might be understandable since not all of your organizations focus on all of this. To provide some summary of this table, of this graph, this is basically the same graph, but the numbers that represents the red percentages in the graph, which is the provide or refer. So here you can see the top one is food, 53%, children's educational, 46%, so on and so forth. And we go all the way down to legal help, which is basically 0% towards the last two. We have at the end of the first column, we have 13% provide about housing issues, homelessness, 13%, so on and so forth. So then there is in the same battery of questions, there were two other questions that try to assess whether there was some change in demand and there was some perceived change in access to services from the clients. So we combine these two graphs, and then we noticed that, for example, those who saw a significant increase from since March 2020, which was when we moved to lockdown, 75% of those find more difficult or perceive a greater difficulty of access of their services by the community members that need them. So this is kind of like this graph summarizes that impact in some of those cases. So after this, we have 56 services grouped in 12 categories. We have about 40, somewhere between 30 to 46, 33 to 46 respondents. So we are talking about 50,000 to 8,000 data points, right? How do we aggregate those? One idea that that we had was, they do not provide, some refer, provide, refer, was, aggregated based on the responses for the question of demand in change since March 2020. And since this has some sort of like ordinal order in there, so from no change, some increase and significant increase, I decided to actually plot the average, right? The same for the other question, client accessibility since March 2020. And with this, I make what is called heat maps. So I'm saying this just to prepare you for what is coming in the next graphs. And this is a heat map of that aggregation of all those questions and responses at the category level. So if you can see, the darker areas show a significant increase in demand between those who provide and don't provide the services. So here you can see, for example, on the column on the right, housing, shelter, and technology are almost towards the number 3, which is the highest, the significant increase. They are on the darker. So here you need to focus on the purple and dark blue, I think, color, the darker colors. So we have basic necessities on the purple, mental health, childcare, legal, and as I said before, technology and housing, shelter. Those were the categories that, according to your responses, show a higher change in demand since March 2020. So that's demand, and this is accessibility, also by 12 categories. Here also the purple and the darker blue show a more difficult access in some of the categories. So we can see here, for example, childcare, legal, social, recreation, and cultural, technology on the purple. Those were the ones who have a higher, more difficult access according to your responses. The service provision is a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview of what happens in terms of the services, the 56 services, not the 12 services. In here, the top ones, the ones that saw a significant increase in demand were the food, help with rental payments, help with heating and electrical bills, threat of eviction, help finding jobs, internet access, and technological devices. In terms of access to services, help with home repairs, help with car repairs or payments, wage theft, health screenings, childcare, legal help, immigration matters, socialization, and recreational activities for other adults. And all of this is the summary of this graph. This is all 56 services, and divided into 2 columns. The column on the left is that do not provide, some refer. The column on the right is provide, refer. And you can see the darker colors is when there was a significant increase in demand based on your responses. So here we have the food, helping help with enough food at the top. And then we have the help with mortgage payments, rental payments, so on and so forth. I hope you guys can, you probably might not be able to see all the details, but the summary that I provide kind of like gives you a picture of that. This is change in demand, and this is change in accessibility since March 2020. Again, same thing, darker colors show more difficulty. And this graph is particularly interesting because if you can see here, there is a lot of purple. So that is somewhere between not change in access and more difficult, right? So there was some, even among those who do not provide the services or have some marginal reference, you can see that there is some movement towards more difficult access to services. So accessibility might be an issue here, even regardless of whether you guys provide a service or you don't. If you don't provide a service, you notice that there was some difficult accessing the service or not. So this is actually, this graph actually provides a clear picture of that. On the right side is obviously those who provide the services, they actually see a more difficult access in terms of socialization for other adults, hearing care, health screenings, well childcare, help with car repairs, payments, wage theft, and so on. Home repairs also, or essential expenses. So yeah, there was some. So the pandemic brought some difficulties in some of these services. So the question had also some open-ended questions, that comments, and Erica DeGlo took a look at those questions, and the following slides were prepared by her. So I'm just gonna be clicking the slides. Erica, I think you are muted, Erica.
Okay, sorry about that. I was muted. Yeah, so the second part of the survey included 10 open-ended question prompts that covered 4 principal areas. We just basically put them together for ease of looking at everything. They included outreach strategies and how folks evaluated their outreach, collaboration and coordination among partner organizations, changes in population and emerging needs, and needs for resources and tools. So we'll summarize each of these 4 areas as we go. You can move it on. In terms of outreach strategies in their evaluation, folks who responded there, and let me just say that of those 48 individuals who completed the survey, I think that was the number, just about everyone answered almost all the questions and offered their comments. So there was quite a rich amount of data there. So folks felt that outreach was generally effective, but it was a continuing challenge as well. Strategies needed adjustment to meet evolving client circumstances and to balance new technologies and other forms of outreach. Direct outreach continued to be important, but digital outreach helped most providers reach more people and improve access to services, particularly around a time when, as we know, public safety issues were important. There was concern about reaching people who lacked or who only had spotty internet access or who were challenged with the use of technology. And partners shared a number of innovations they had, including the use of ambassadors to reach folks, new and expanded uses of social media, increased internal coordination and collaboration with partner organizations. And there were several examples of these that were given. Most organizations didn't have the capacity to evaluate outreach success except through increased demand. Some used data analytics that were available through digital platforms. There were also surveys and et cetera that were done to get feedback from the clients that they served on occasion. But evaluating was a difficult thing to do for many organizations. Okay. Collaboration and coordination between partner organizations. Folks shared that collaboration was not always easy, but an important and critical step to assess needs and to identify resources, to find solutions beyond individual organizations, and to help determine strategies, including strategies for outreach, what was working and what was not. They mentioned several opportunities for collaboration, such as sharing a community center, a community kitchen, or a refrigerated van, perhaps developing a resource directory that could be shared and regularly updated to list available services and providers. Resources for immigrants were sorely needed, including legal services and housing resources, and collaboration on these at this level was noted as well. Better integration of behavioral and mental health services with primary health care was mentioned a few times, including, for example, real-time behavioral health appointments for OBGYN patients, open access intake appointments for consumers needing a higher level of psychiatric or mental health care, increased capacity for nursing or case management teams, access to interns and volunteers, and I forgot the other one. And a few folks mentioned some resources and best practices in the use of Zoom and other platforms. We've all become experts now, I think, at least to some degree. Okay. Several changes in population and emerging needs were mentioned. Organizations said they needed to change their modes of operation for public health and safety, obviously, just as needs in the community skyrocketed due to the pandemic, to loss of work, and to increased economic insecurity. Folks were concerned particularly about the newly needy who were not accustomed to seeking help and really didn't know where to go. Primary needs of Princeton's low-income community were food insecurity and the challenges of paying rent, as Oscar already mentioned, but also social isolation, health, and mental health needs were mentioned. Other groups expanded their missions to provide food and support to community members, and a new group was established to meet needs that were not being met. Resource needs that were mentioned by organizations: funding, obviously, volunteers, supplies, staffing, greater interorganizational collaboration and communication, coordinated outreach, and one provider noted the need for space. They also mentioned what clients needed, and that included transportation to health appointments, health screenings for folks, including hearing and dental, help with internet connectivity and technology.
And that's pretty much it. Basically, yeah. So that was the open-ended questions. This is just a table on how we organize the different topics, the groups, into different categories to actually synthesize what happens at the individual grouping. So this is based on the mission statements that you guys provided in the survey. And with that, thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Oscar.
Well, thank you, Erica. So thank you, everybody. So.
This was a very complicated survey to put together because there was such a range of service providers doing very different things, and we all tried to put it into one bucket, so to speak. And I think Oscar's done a great job giving us some directions, some trends, and we would very much like to hear from folks who participated in the survey, first of all, and other community partners in terms of any questions you might have in what you've just heard, and in terms of your experience during this time.
Thank you, Erica. Before we move on, I'm gonna moderating questions. And we're gonna, ask everybody to, to keep it to 1 minute, to please use the feature of the hand to raise your hand. I'm gonna be calling each person after 1 minute. If you have additional comments, please email Ro, Erica, or myself. And I'm gonna just first give the opportunity to the people or community partners who participated in the listening sessions and answered the survey. And after that, I know that we have the flexibility task force that join us as well. And after the people who participated, we're gonna give opportunity to the flexibility task force to ask any questions, right? And I would like to thank you, Oscar, for all his work that he did analyzing the survey and everything and all the meetings that he all the time that he put on this, and Erica and the subcommittee for all this work, because it was intense, and we've been working on this for a long time.
As well as a shout out to our partners at the Princeton Survey Research Community, who really tightened up what we wanted to do and also sent it out there.
Yeah, well said, Erica, and thank you to all of you for to participating as well. So I'm gonna move to Erica. Erica, can you repeat the question again?
I think first of all, if anyone has any specific questions, either to Oscar, to me, or other members of the committee about the survey, the results, what was presented, we might start with that first, if anyone has questions. And this survey will be shared. I think Ro might have something to say about how and when the presentation will be shared.
I'll just chime in. I'll certainly share it with all you folks that were on the listserv, the presentation, so be on the lookout. Thank you.
Thanks, Ro.
So I'm looking for any hands for any questions, any comments. Anyone? Oh, Leticia?
Yes, thank you again, Oscar, Erica, and everyone who worked on this. It was even better than the last time it was presented to us. I just have a couple of comments. One, I think, it's great to see, to have an idea of what the services that are being provided, and also to identify where gaps exist and what is needed. And just, I think, not just gathering this information, it's really would be great if we can get to a point where this information can be updated regularly, what's available, and a directory, an online directory, and also something that we could distribute to our residents, our vulnerable population, would be, I think, a really good tool for them. As far as updating information, I just wanted to make a comment on the question that came up at the Human Services Commission meeting, and just use it as an example. The question came up about the lack of access, lack of transportation for some of our residents to the Penn Medical Center, and that's something that's been an issue since the hospital moved outside of Princeton. And I had reported at the time, but it wasn't clear whether it was still ongoing, that the Tiger Transit, the university's Tiger Transit, does offer transportation to Penn Medicine on a regular basis. And it's not just for university students and staff, it's open to the public too. And I heard from Larry Spruill, who followed up on that, who said that they're actually working on improving whether it's more routes, more times that they're going to go there, but that they're actually improving it. So it is available. And those are just the type of services, information that really not just service providers to have that information, but to make sure that our residents and members of the public know about it. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to comment on. Thank you again.
Thank you. So I'm now going to give the opportunity to the community partners who participated. We want to hear, specific about, things related to the need assessment is possible, because we want to be mindful to everybody's time. So I see that Maria Juega has her hand on, and then I'm going to go to Kim Dorman. Maria Juega.
Thank you, Veronica. This is a fantastic presentation, very eye-opening. I'm looking forward to seeing the actual report and digesting all the data. And it's very timely in terms of another effort that some of you may know is going on, and that's a task force that is studying the feasibility of a community center in Princeton, of which I'm a member. And this is going to be tremendously useful for us in terms of making recommendations to council as to areas of need that this report has identified, and how a community center could perhaps address some of those needs. So that this is great. And my question in general is, what are we going to do with this data? What is the Human Services Commission going to do any kind of follow-up? I think this is an incredible resource to spur us into action as a community. And that definitely, I think it makes it clearer than ever that we need to work as a community in addressing the needs that have been identified, as opposed to in a piecemeal fashion, which is part of, I think, part of what we're trying to accomplish, and it's to take advantage of the synergies that exist among the various organizations. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. And I'm gonna answer a little bit of your question. So we want to be careful on how do we move forward with this information. Right now, the idea for us is to present it to our community partners, everybody who was, participating. And then after that, we're gonna make decisions toward where are we going, right? We are aware of the, community flexibility task force. And I think, like you say, this is gonna be very important, because to be able to, to go to council and mayor and to say, oh, we need a community center, we need to have some data, right? We need to figure it out. We need to find the gaps with what we have available. What do we need, right? And whether these organizations that we already have in the community are able to maybe, open their doors and help us with those gaps before we actually do those kind of asking. So in order for us to be careful that what we're doing need assessment is can be used for that purpose as well. And I'm gonna not spam too much, because that's what I agree with the subcommittee, and I'm gonna respect that. So I'm gonna go, somebody from the subcommittee would like to answer, or should I just move?
I'd just like to throw in briefly that is why it's so important to have these interim meetings, because this is as mentioned, a community needs assessment that is in a sense a very dynamic process, because unfortunately the pandemic has been very dynamic and things keep changing. And I think it's very important, we'd like to have a report as part of this, that we have to figure out how we're going to do it. But it's very important to have your input about, did we get this part of it right at that particular time when we did this? How have things changed? What are gaps that you see now? Do the gaps that I think identified in this report, are they still here, or are they different gaps? So it's very important to hear from all of you, either today or in communications afterwards.
I know Kim. Thank you, Erica. Kim, do you have your hand raised?
Oh, thanks. I did. I'm trying to think about how to phrase my question. Firstly, I want to thank you all for the phenomenal amount of work that you've done. I mean, I just know that sending out the survey to all of these different community partners and organizations that do so many different things and trying to make questions that kind of work for everybody is an almost impossible task. And you've done everything you can to gather that information to this wonderful report that I'm sure will be very helpful. I think my question is more a two-part sort of tech or like specific to the survey. Like, there are a lot of questions that the library doesn't get that information. We don't collect that data, and so we couldn't return it to you. So I guess how do the people who brought the data from the survey manage that. Like, we can't answer the questions because we don't collect the data. And then the other side of that is there data that would be helpful for an organization or other organizations to collect that we don't already?
Perhaps Oscar can help us with that, because that was one of the big challenges of the survey, because there's so many providers who collect different kinds of information or hardly collect information at all. So we had this very broad range. So the data that we have is, I think, not hard data in the sense that one might usually consider. So Oscar, do you want to talk a little bit about how you managed that big challenge?
Yeah, well, it wasn't easy. So especially because there was a huge range of answers on many topics, many services. Again, in this case, the goal was to try to summarize all those different data points on all those different services, all the variation that we see in the data. So it was mostly try to find a way to come up with some sort of like aggregate of that. In the case of the individual gathering data for individual organizations, I think that will be probably easier because you have a specific focus. But also if you engage in some of those data gathering, so you probably may want to include some additional battery of questions related to something beyond your area of expertise, so you can actually have an idea what is out there. But in general, it was just a matter to put everything together and take just try to summarize as much as we can all the different answers into something that makes sense, right? And I hope these results makes sense somehow. But if you have any other questions on this, just let me know. I don't need that answer the question, but I hope it does.
Thank you, Oscar. I just like to, everybody's asking whether we're going to be able to share the report. In the chat, I did say we're going to just do additional revisions for a few days. And then for any data that anything that you would like to send us via email to Ro, Erica, or myself, we're going to kind of figure it out whether we can add some table related to this discussion. That's why it's so important for you if you have any question or additional things that we need to know, like that, please raise your hand. So I'm gonna move back to Erica if she has any questions.
Okay. Well, I think if there are other questions from our partners, this would be the time. So please raise your hand. I see there's a couple of hands up.
Erica, I don't see them. Can you call somebody? Because I'm
yeah, okay, I've got the thing up. I see Anna Rose Gable.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks. I teach ESL at Princeton High School, and I just want to echo everyone by saying thank you for sharing all of the data you guys collected. Obviously, this was a huge project, and I'm excited to look in more detail at what you learned. One thing that I didn't see necessarily reflected, and I could have missed it, or maybe it's collected in a way that I just didn't see, but I think one thing that's been on my mind is, are all of the services that are available accessible to people in Spanish in addition to English? I think that one thing that I see as a big barrier in Princeton is language accessibility. We have these wonderful services, but if you can't communicate with the provider, it can really be a barrier. And I think on the flip side of that, one thing I've seen, especially among our families, is a desire for beginner ESL classes. So I think we have a great range of ESL classes at higher levels or that you can purchase, but I think, to my knowledge, there's no entry level freely accessible ESL class. So sorry, I know those are kind of small details and this is a big survey, but that's what came to my mind. Thank you guys so much again.
Great. Thanks so much. Yeah, I don't know if Ro has something to add about language accessibility, and I think that very much depends on the service. I remember from the listening sessions that was a big issue that came up for a lot of folks, particularly in the area of mental health services.
Yeah, there is in the survey, there is a section that is called English language, and there is like 25% of the providers provide that services in terms of English. I don't know if that covers what that question is about, but yeah, there is some providing on that for that. There is some changes in terms of the yeah, there was some significant increase in demand for that during the pandemic, and there was some difficulty accessing those services according to the results in the survey.
Thanks, Oscar.
Yep.
Thank you, Oscar. I was going to point that out. I think in the survey, when you guys received the information, whoever was answering the surveys will have been able to put that data. So whatever Oscar analyzed is reflected there. Anybody else? Felicia?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for everybody's work on this. I have an observation. I saw two things that really stuck out that I hope get some focus in this. One was that there's a need for collaboration and cooperation between agencies. And two was that funding was the #1 problem listed. And then there was immediately discussion about a community center, which is yet another organization that would be fighting for the same dollars and, you know, replicating or duplicating services that other agencies provide. And I think it's really important. And I think one of the things, I see Drew nodding his head, one of the things we learned from SURF was that we actually have a lot of these resources. And if we work together, then everybody would have access to all resources. And, you know, before we start down the path of creating something new and throwing away, you know, I think it would be beneficial to make some genuine effort to get agencies working together and seeing if we could fill these gaps with the existing agencies we have before we start creating something new. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. Yeah, I mean, that is, you know, we have somebody that we appoint to the flexibility task force, and that is actually Erica. So this is so beautiful because Erica is the chair of this subcommittee who has been working with our commissioners who are, you know, part of this need assessment. And thanks to that, she's able to have that conversation to the flexibility task force, and they were invited to this presentation as well. So believe me, everybody's being careful. We're trying just to do a good job finding those gaps. What do we have available? Whether we can work with organizations that are already here. And if we are missing something, then move forward with a plan, right? So we're being very careful. Thank you. Drew?
Excellent. Thank you so much, first to the team and for the research and the work on bringing agencies together. I think the collaboration is going to be critical as we move forward to meet the services. I just have a quick question on the statistical analysis, and that really is, you know, when we looked at the percentages of people or organizations that worked with families with minor children and adolescents, single adults, older adults, do we have comparative data on percentage of the Princeton population? So I think that's, you know, one of my questions is we may see even further gaps if we say, you know, for instance, seniors, you know, 13 to 16% of our work is focused around seniors, but they represent 40% of the population. That would indicate an even bigger gap. So I'm just curious, knowing the new demographics from the 2020 census are recently out, if there's been any work on that comparative data with our percentage of population.
Oscar?
Yeah, that was a little bit of a, we tried that at the beginning, but there is no data on, for example, it was hard to compare because there is no data on homeless individuals, for example. Or there is like at least census data or disabled adults. So the percentages were a little bit hard to compile and to compare directly. That is probably, might be probably the next step on this, having these numbers. See if we can somehow have some sort of like a count of Princeton in particular about these distributions, right? Because this was the distribution based on the survey that the Human Service Commission put out there. So there is some idea, but it's not that that reliable. So it will be hard to compare, statistically speaking. So this was posted here just to have an idea in terms of the survey providers, right? So is it that enough for you or not? Because in some cases, there was some, in the case of the families, for example, there were some providers that, 80% of the services are directly to families with small children. In some other cases, only 10%. So it was kind of hard. So it was enough, is it enough for them or not? And we start comparing them to the census, it's gonna say, okay, we are way higher or way lower, right? So in this case, the decision is for the town and you guys to see whether, is this enough for you in terms of like the scope of your richness, or do you need to do some adjustments, right? So that, I don't know, that maybe is up to you for have a discussion on that. One thing that is, it is striking is the last group, which is the homeless individual and disabled adults, that they receive a very, even in the average, they receive a very, very low percentage of attention. So, but yeah, probably the next step will be to see whether we can do a higher effort in terms of compare that in terms of the census exactly. But it was very difficult given the data that we just collected.
Thank you, Oscar. I do have a question in the chat from Linda that is for you as well. Are there any similar data from comparable New Jersey towns, any state level data? I did remember you did work on a need assessment in Trenton, but I don't know whether it was similar.
No, that's a different, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a different. So this data is unique to Princeton. So it will be hard. I mean, we will have to do the same survey somewhere else if we want to have a comparable idea. It also depends how many organizations the other community has. But it's a good idea to have in the future. Maybe another community, another town may wanna pursue similar efforts, and then we can start having some comparative results across the region.
Thank you. Anybody else besides Maria Juega? Maria, I'm just trying to be mindful in calling for the community partners. Anybody who participated in the survey on the listening sessions who would like to ask a question or make a comment before I move to Maria? No? Okay, Maria.
Hi, thank you. I would like to respond to Felicia's comment earlier. The Princeton Community Center Task Force is precisely addressing or very mindful of the fact that this effort should not be about duplicating efforts, and it's all about precisely coordinating efforts among the existing resources and the existing organizations. That is exactly what this intends to do, to become a catalyst or a way to unite efforts and to coordinate efforts. That's exactly the philosophy that we are acting under. So we're extremely mindful that we don't want to create yet another bureaucracy, yet another organization that is going to compete for resources, but rather to exploit possible synergies across organizations and to facilitate the cooperation among all of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Charo. Anybody, Erica, do you have any questions for?
I think I'd like to move us to where folks are now. Are there gaps that you are seeing? Are there emerging needs as we come out of a different stage of this pandemic? And I think that would be helpful to our thinking as well. So that's a question thrown out to everyone. I think Kim also wanted to make a comment.
Well, I guess, yeah, sorry. I just wanted to ask, I know that, we've had a couple of there's been a couple of mentions of like ways that people work together. I know that Princeton Human Services does a housing stability meeting, bringing like-minded organizations together. And I believe there's also a group that meets about food. I'm just wondering, what are other ways that, and this could be something separate, I just want to know, and it came up as all these conversations were happening, what other ways are groups that offer services in town being brought together for these conversations so we can find ways to collaborate and close gaps?
Ro, would you like to answer?
Honestly, I mean, we are coordinating the housing meeting. We are coordinating the food meeting. In this position, you know, I've been here for a few months now. I'm also trying to explore ways that we can really bring groups together. I know I've had a couple conversations with our neighboring churches about rejoining and having like, be it quarterly meetings or annual meetings. We've also discussed bringing together, really, I didn't want to introduce this in this setting, but you know, Kim, you brought it out of me. So there's a platform that I'd like to explore us using, which is called Basecamp. And maybe this is the perfect setting for me to introduce this with all of us here. I see Felicia nodding, so I know a few of you are familiar with it, but it's a communication platform in which we could really develop channels in which different organizations that were like-minded could communicate, but as well as share information to the masses in a formal way that doesn't require a monthly meeting, a quarterly meeting, so be it. It's so that we can share information in the minute and really get this information then trickle down to our community members. So that is something I'm working on, but it's to come later and down the line once the final report is developed. So more to come on that front. But thanks, Kim, for bringing it up.
Yeah, I would also just say that coordination and communication and joint outreach and all different types of collaboration has been a thread from the very beginning, from our very first meeting pre-pandemic. I think, Kim, you were there, into those listening sessions and throughout this survey as well. And I think that these are areas that both partners in the community do all the time, but perhaps can strengthen as well, and are ways that I think the commission needs to look at, and both from some of the suggestions in the survey and your suggestions now too. And if Veronica,
yeah, thank you. And it's so funny that you mentioned that, because our commission is actually working on revising their subcommittees. It seems that the subcommittees have been really old, and you know, we are trying to align those subcommittees to what we're doing with the needs assessment, but also with the goals of mayor and council, who are social equity as well in this, you know, kind of related to that. And the housing coalition that you mentioned, Kim Dorman, it has been like, it's something that has been working really nicely, because all these partners work together in helping our neighbors in everything related to rental assistance and any other needs related to, you know, to housing, and the same way with the food. So I think I'm looking forward to see what Roy is going to be doing next, and what is our commission going to move forward with those subcommittees.
Yeah, it's a beautiful model. That's why I wanted to bring it up.
Thank you. I'm going to call Debbie.
Yes, so you asked the change. So I'm representing the Princeton Mobile Food Pantry, and our numbers are going up. And it's not just families as much as singles, like seniors. We were talking this morning in our group meeting. We're seeing a lot more seniors that need food. So we're still seeing the demand, and maybe with the rent, you know, not being paid, more money will go to that, and so less for food. So we're not seeing a slowdown. And then for us too, the fact that food prices are going up, so our dollars aren't representing as much as they used to. And that's what we're seeing. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Jorge?
Good afternoon, everyone. Jorge with Unidad Latina en Acción, New Jersey. This is a great report. I missed part of the presentation, so if we can get anything before that, so we can also share we work primarily with domestic workers and day laborers. And as Debbie were mentioned, we also have seen we have a food distribution on Sundays with PMA. We used to deliver almost 40 bags, and now we thought it was going to be less, but now last week we did like almost 60 to 70 bags of food. It is going up. The other thing that we have seen is the lack of access to dignity jobs, especially for day laborers and domestic workers. We have submitted a proposal, I think it was in the beginning of the pandemic to some of the council members in Princeton about a worker center idea that we had. We keep working on it. We also are seeing the access to rent, available rent that people can afford, affordable rent that people can afford it. Where can they live? It has been a tremendous gap in our community, especially for domestic workers and day laborers. So I would love to connect with anybody that can help in those issues as well.
Thank you. Jorge. I think Aggie. Yeah.
I want to say that the housing stability has been together for about 3 or 4 years, and it really, really works well. And with all the different organizations in town, and maybe we just need to let more people know about it.
Thank you, Aggie. Yeah, that's correct. I think, we assume that everybody knows what is happening, behind curtains, but it's a beautiful group. And, they created a universal application for everybody, and that's how they can work beautifully. Anybody have any questions? Or Erica, do you want to have make another question?
I asked a question. I would like to see if you can tell me an answer.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Anybody would like to answer, Jorge? Jorge, can you repeat just the main, because
Yeah, the question was if we can get the report in order to before it was released, and to see if we can also share with workers to see their input, because I think that it has to come from people that are going to be benefit of it. So we missed half of the presentation, but if there's any way that we can get it before, and also we can support and put it in Spanish or in any other language as well.
Thank you, Jorge. So actually, I think we start working with the community partners directly, only the providers. We haven't moved to that part that we're working with the people who are the users of the people who use those services. So this part is only for the, Erica, do you wanted to answer something else?
Well, I think, Ro, were you talking about the possibility of putting this on the municipality's YouTube? Because it's recorded, the presentation is recorded. Is that something that you plan on doing? So I mean, I think it's fine to have community voices right beyond the partners. And I think we will come up with a report that hopefully is usable for partners essentially. But I think the discussions can happen among the people that you work with. I don't see a problem there. I think that would be useful.
Yeah, at least
useful,
Yeah, no, thank you. Appreciate it. I mean, at least we can get some, inputs. Maybe we can do some. They are the ones we're going to be using. So I feel that they definitely need to get some feedback about it.
And you mentioned that it will be nice to have it translated in Spanish, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
But if before we release it, if we can get it in English, then we can just discuss it, and then we can send you some feedback in an email or whatever.
Okay. Thank you, Jorge. One of us will follow. Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I wonder if I can just highlight. I was looking at the report a little bit back, and there was one section that wasn't illuminated when I compared the groupings of the organizations and the different groups they serve, families with minor children, disabled adults. One thing that it wasn't highlighted in there that I just highlighted in this report is and this came also in some of the previous meetings, and this is something I just learned in terms of like the definition of the homeless, right? Because one number that actually came up higher was education among homeless individuals from 2019 to 2020. So that went from 0% in 2019 to all of a sudden 20% in 2020 among those who actually you guys identify as homeless. And in some of those meetings, kind of like there was this comment that the idea of homelessness is not just who don't have a house, but also those who actually are in transitional housing, which are also part of families that have children and all that. But those, I think, and this is all the additional problem of comparing these numbers with some aggregated census data is that the definition of homelessness, it seems is not unique to one particular group, but it covers other groups that may have some temporary housing, but they are considered homeless. So basically kids that don't have access to education. So, and that will explain why education during the pandemic came up higher, 20 percentage point higher compared to 2019. And that is something that some of the organizations might actually want to look at. Then the new version of the report is going to highlight that section, but I just wanted to point it out because I thought it was an important point in terms of the definition of the concepts of who are you targeting, but also pay a deep attention to those details in terms of those percentages who are apparently low, but they are significant because there is a section of the population that probably is not being properly served.
Thank you, Oscar.
Thank you. Erica, do you have any other questions?
I don't.
Okay.
And if, unless folks have either observations to share or some thoughts about what the experience is now or what we're facing going forward with this pandemic and its aftermath, I think we might move to thanking everyone and inviting you to share comments via email. Do we need to put our email addresses up there or?
I think everybody have it, or Ro can send, she CC me and Erica when you got the invitations, or
Okay.
emails are available in your email. But before we move on, I know that we have some educators, and it's not that I want to put you in the spotlight, but I would like to hear at least from one or two educators from our community to see whether, you have some new information, because I know you were struggling with technology, but you did such a good job providing laptops and be able to have those Zooms ready for the kids during the pandemic, right? So after you face those challenges, if there is any new challenge that we need to be aware of that is related to what we're doing? No? No hands raised? Okay, last opportunity for anybody to make a comment or question before we move on. No, I'm gonna just look at the chat before we go. Okay, I see a lot of comments that, thank you. Okay, so I guess this is time to say thank you to everybody for participating. And thank you.
Sorry, Veronica, you did have, sorry, I thought you had a raised hand, but it's off now.
No? Okay.
There it is.
Okay, where? Oh, yes,
That's
Becca.
me.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again. Sorry, I was kind of juggling between students and listening, but it's been wonderful work. I just wanted to kind of point out, according to Veronica's question, in terms of what's going on in the school system. So I am the coordinator of student services for the 9th through 12th graders at Princeton High School. I replaced Lenoir Keel. So, you know, in terms of technology, we actually sent out a recent survey. We're waiting for responses. I think throughout the pandemic, for the most part, we really provided as much technology in terms of actual laptops to hotspots and all of that to our students. And then as things got a little bit better through the pandemic, we even allowed students to come into the building that were having some technology issues. So in terms of that, I think we really were able to address that challenge. But one thing that I am seeing across the board, and I'll just add quickly, because I know that there was some conversations around trying to get some services for our adolescents. That's one of the things that I'm really seeing is a big challenge in terms of mental health services, as well as just recreational community services. I see that we have folks from Community House on here, as well as Corner House, and that's amazing. They do amazing work with some of our youth, but we also need just places for our youth to go, rather than, you know, hanging out, you know, in town and all of that, which is great, but just having more constructive activities for young people to go to, I think is going to be key as we look at filling some of the community gaps. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bethany. And I'm sure Roy is very happy to hear this because, you know, what she's trying to do moving forward. And also, so, you know, we now have another social worker in addition to Eric and in the commission. And we just started, we're going to start working on a subcommittee for mental health and wellness, health and wellness. And we have a high schooler actually in, you know, joining our subcommittee. And that is, you know, that we're already thinking and without knowing, working in, you know, in parallel with what are the needs.
And I would add that if there are community members or partners who might want to join us for a meeting or a subcommittee or committee, whatever, to address these issues and to brainstorm a little bit, I think that would be a really helpful thing.
Yes, I'd love to be involved. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Yes. Anybody from the community partners who would like to make a comment or answer, Bethany? If I don't see a hand, let me know because I'm
Veronica, it's Felicia. I have my hand
okay.
up.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think that between the library and the Y, there are a lot of really great programs and resources already. So, you know, not that I'm volunteering Kim or Kate or anything, but it would be great to work with the contacts at these organizations already to maybe find out what Bethany's seeing, because they probably already have a program that's close that maybe just needs a couple tweaks, and it would be a perfect fit for the kids right now. But I hope that we leverage both of those really great organizations.
Thank you. Erica Bibbs.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the comments about the library, mentioning that we, you know, one of the things that we're realizing is that there's a lack of awareness about the library actually even being open right now. The library is open till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, Friday and Saturday till 6 and Sunday till 6 p.m. And we hope and encourage students to come to the library. We still are requiring masks to protect the littlest of our visitors. And we do have plenty of engaging activities happening at the library. We're moving more towards having things in person, and we're really open to suggestions. And then we have a really robust summer reading program. I know that we have some more work to do in really planning some regular engaging programming for children, but please encourage them to come to the library. We would love to see students, children, people of all ages visiting the library. We're open. We're so happy to see everybody, and thank you for thinking of us. And please we're always open to suggestions about more things that we can do to improve.
Thank you. And just, we have Arts Council, we have the WISE, so I'm sure that everybody, have other programs available, and I'm sure they can connect with Bethany or the educators in case they don't know what they have available. She cannot talk because Kate put something in the chat, but I wanted to mention that, right? Anybody else? Thank you, Erica, that would like to make anything related to the need assessment, any questions or additional comments for us that it may be important for us to know? No? Okay, so I guess we're gonna look at the chat later on because I just see comments of thank you. So we appreciate all your messages and appreciate all your participation and taking the time for the listening sessions, for going to all these meetings. Thank you again for Oscar for volunteering his time, doing analyzing the data, being in so many meetings with us as well. Thank you for Erica, Ro, all the staff of Human Service Commission, and for everyone, and also committee that made this possible. So I would like to just say thank you and have a good day.
Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.